Right. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to this workshop entitled Building Better Tech Habits. Before we dive into tonight's topic, let's take a moment to acknowledge the lens on which we are here today. Although this meeting is taking place virtually, it brings us together on the ancestral and unceded territories of Indigenous peoples. The province of Ontario is covered by 46 treaties and agreements, which speak to the ongoing and living presence of First Nations, Métis, and Inuit communities. Personally, I live in Toronto, which is situated on the traditional territory of many nations, including the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Anishinaabeg, the Chippewa, the Haudenosaunee, and the Wenda peoples, and is now home to many diverse First Nations, Inuit, and Métis peoples. I'm deeply grateful to live and work on this lands. I also wish to reaffirm my commitment to building respectful, lasting, and meaningful relationships with Indigenous communities. And I would love to briefly introduce myself to everyone. My name is Mabel Chen. I'm the Volunteer Activities Officer at Parents Partenaires en Éducation. This workshop series is the result of a valuable collaboration with the Conseil Scolaire Catholique Providence. I would like to extend a heartfelt thank you to the school board for its dedication to supporting families. And the workshops we are offering are part of the project Informed Parent, Thriving Youth, Understanding and Preventing Modern Addictions. This project is essential as modern addictions, whether they are related to technology, vaping, or other risky behaviors. They have become part of everyday life for many of our youth. As parents, it's vital to be informed and equipped so we can fully play our roles as educators, guide our children, and offer them a healthy environment in which they can thrive. Screen time in particular is one of the greatest concern for parents and even for young people themselves. Nearly half of them admit to spending too much time on their phones. In a world where technology is an integral part of daily life, how can we as families develop healthier digital habits? So tonight you will discover practical strategies to help your children regain control over their use of devices and applications instead of feeling trapped by them. So we have the pleasure and the privilege of welcoming Marc-Alexandre Ladouceur, a media education specialist tonight. Marc-Alexandre develops educational resources for parents, educators, and students while representing Media Smarts with parents across Canada. He holds a master's degree in theology as well as two bachelor's degrees in education and theology. With a rich background in teaching and school-based programming in both Ontario and Alberta, he is deeply committed to promoting inclusive and accessible digital literacy to support everyone in this ever-evolving tech world. But before turning things over to him, I would like to invite Michelle, notre directrice responsable de la réussite école sécuritaire en français, or in English, to our director of Safe Schools at Conseil Scolaire Catholique Providence, to share a few words.
So, good evening. Thank you for the introduction. And I'd just like to start the evening with a prayer. So, in the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Hope is our vocation, Lord, and the destination of our pilgrim journey. And as we celebrate this Jubilee of Hope, keep our eyes fixed on Jesus and on the hope he reveals to us. For our hope is in you, O God, through Jesus, our traveling companion and friend. In the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen. And on behalf of our school board, I'd like to welcome you to this workshop with respects to building better tech habits, which is organized obviously with parents, partners in education. And I want to take the time to thank you for taking time out of your schedule. This is one of the important elements on our day-to-day teaching with your children. We find that with partnerships, when we develop and give sort of strategies, it helps both sides of raising a child and makes it just a bit more efficient and helpful. Mark's got some great suggestions this evening. I was with him last night with our French panel. But again, if you have any questions, please feel free to put them in the chat. We'll definitely respond to them after. We'll make sure that we're not recording. And you can also ask your question live if you are more comfortable versus typing it. And As far as if you have any other suggestions for different workshops that would be useful for you or resources that you're looking for, please don't hesitate to ask, and we'll definitely get back to you on that. So without further ado, I'd like to pass the mic on to Mark.
Thank you so very much. I am so happy to have the opportunity to present this subject again tonight. I believe that when we're talking about building better tech habits, the title of tonight's presentation, we're not just giving a title, we're not just offering a presentation, but talking about these habits, these abilities that we might be worried that we master or not, the abilities of our children to always kind of move a little bit out of reach from where we feel most comfortable. And I think it is actually quite feasible to find uh, tricks, tips, but most importantly, attitudes and critical thinking questions that will allow us to support them in this constantly evolving tech and media landscape world, whatever we want to call it. I'll be sharing my screen in just a second now, and we will be diving right into tonight's presentation so that we can take full advantage of what is, I was just sharing earlier, a hot off the press update to this presentation. As far as we're all concerned here tonight, this presentation was developed specifically for this evening. And given that, I do want to thank everybody who is attending tonight with all of the same thanks and all the same considerations that have already been mentioned. We know that screen time is one of parents' top tech related concerns, and according to our research at Media Smarts, it's the most common source of tech related conflict between parents and young people in Canada, which might surprise some, but perhaps also confirms what we sometimes suspect. Listen, it's great because I know conflict, it's great. What am I saying? Well, we know that kids are already worried about their screen use as well as their parents. Almost half of kids say that they spend too much time on their phones already. So, given this positive breach into the conversation, what is the best way to address what's become one of our top concerns relating to media and technology? So, as we get into this conversation, I would like to invite everyone, if you have the time or the desire, of course, there is absolutely no obligation to follow the QR code in order to do a presentation evaluation on what your expectations are. Now, this is completely anonymous, and the data strictly serves to help us develop better resources. As I've mentioned, this one is very, very recently updated that I would be particularly grateful for anything that we can learn about your expectations or your understanding, or even what you feel might need to be included in order to keep perfecting it so that people can really get the best out of these presentations. It's completely voluntary, so if you do not want to, please feel no pressure. My appreciation for your presence does not change based on this program evaluation. Okay, so we know that our organization, Media Smarts, does the research. I mentioned it just now. We do a research called Young Canadians in a Wireless World. We've been doing it since the year 2000 to find out what our youth's experience is using technology and developing online lives. And this research is not just done for us, it actually helps inform policy and set benchmarks for further research on children's digital lives. And it has been the subject of much discussion in all sorts of environments and continues to be the leading research done in Canada today on the subject, which gives us the ability to talk about tech habits. But why are we using tech habits instead of perhaps a word that we've heard a little bit more regularly in all forms of media that we might be consuming recently? Why do we talk about habits instead of addiction? First, actually, the first reason is blatantly because there's very little evidence that any of the devices or apps that we use are addictive in the way that substances like tobacco or even activities like gambling are. Talking about addiction can also backfire, giving us an excuse to not do anything to change the role that screens play in our lives. Teens will often readily admit to being addicted to their phones or to social media, but our research actually found that kids who were worried about screen time didn't spend any less time online. So addiction may not be the factor here. I will also note that it is very popular to use words addiction and some sort of alarmist phrasing following publications that have caught a lot of public attention. Now, while The Anxious Generation at this point might be considered a bestseller, I have to say that on the research and methodology side, not only does it lack any sort of results on the promises that it sets out in its theses, it also offers questionable methodology. This being said, I think the reason that it is so popular is because it does touch on a subject that we also know to be real. There is something that has to be said about our relationships with our online lives and with our devices. And it does, of course, affect kids in a way that worries us more because they are a more vulnerable population. Given that, I will be using the expression habits tonight to talk about what we can do with our devices in order instead of addiction, which would, I mean, largely suffice to say, uh, tell us what we can't do with our devices. Of course, there are always some questions about worries and dangers that might exist with these devices, and so the can't can become part of the conversation. But when we're talking about addiction, we fall into the temptation of the abstinence model, which, I mean, time and time again through pedagogical history has been shown to be an ineffective model in learning how to deal with that which is being abstained from. As the Dr. Michael Rich from the Digital Wellness Lab puts it, the label of addiction isn't helpful when it skews our response and fails to provide the young person, well, I mean, you can read it here on screen, with the means of writing a pattern of media use that has gone awry. Using this vocabulary of patterns and of writing patterns means that there is absolutely and practically and materially things that can be done to change these behaviors or these patterns. It's not a matter of strength of character, it's a matter of learning. Thinking in terms of addiction can also suggest that the only solution I've mentioned already is abstinence. And it's unrealistic when we consider that students need to go online for schoolwork and will most eventually be used for them at work as well. Not only that, but as parents, we don't want to take away their phones. In fact, two-thirds of kids say that they were given their phones in the first place, not because they asked for it, but because their parents wanted to be able to keep in touch with them. And well, unlike genuinely addictive substances, phones and social media also provide kids with a lot of benefits. We're not talking about a phone that only does bad things. It is not a simple detrimental device. It offers a lot of benefits from social connection to education to self-expression, and research suggests that those youth who are most vulnerable to the harms also get the most benefit, which means and what we can do is learn to navigate those harms in order to avoid them or to know how to deal with them as best possible in order to maximize the benefits that we get out of them. With the exception of the very youngest kids, therefore, our goal is not to reduce screen time as much as possible, but to help them develop habits that will let them balance the harms and benefits. And of course, balance is um, another one of those words that can mean so much. So I'm really going to try to keep it as concrete as possible here. Balanced device use is manageable. You feel in control of your device use, and it doesn't get in the way of other things that you need or that you enjoy. It's also meaningful in that the time that you spend feels worthwhile to you. That could be things like learning, creating, connecting with friends and family, but it could also be playing a game or watching a video that's really engaging and satisfying. Think about it for a moment. We're talking about teens tonight, but our own phone or device use can be used very often to play a role of satisfaction. And that satisfaction can come from something that we just want to sit down and relax while doing. We also want to be aware of how we're using it. And finally, a balanced device use is mindful. You want to make intentional choices, and when you do it, you know that you're present, you're not distracted, you're not on autopilot. Just as we define balance as being pardon me, being manageable, meaningful, and mindful, there are three phenomena, three states that contribute to unbalanced use that we want to address as well. First is what we call displacement. And displacement is when it takes time away that would otherwise be spent with friends or family or doing something important like exercising or getting sleep. This makes it feel less manageable. So we see that displacement is related to the manageability. When we're talking about displacement, we always want to consider that what we are doing is not automatically a displacement, but is a displacement because it is actually taking time away. This is why it's important to keep screen time as close to zero as possible for kids under 2, because they do need as much of all of these things, that is, time with friends, family, or doing important things like getting enough sleep. All of these things they need as much as possible. For older kids, think about whether or not a screen activity is providing something that you don't want displaced. Is it helping them get exercise, like a dance game or Pokemon Go? Is it helping them learn something, whether that's school related or one of your child's interests, like history or dinosaurs, or something practical, like cooking or playing guitar? And are they making or creating something, like writing a story or making a video game, or heck, even turning around and creating a video about that guitar lesson they just played or that cooking recipe that they just tried and made their own? And are they socializing in a meaningful way with friends or family members? Research has found that kids who mostly play video games alone are likely to become lonelier over time, while those who play games with others become less so. So we see here, it is not the fact of playing a game that necessarily affects their social development. It is how that game is played. One of the clearest ways that screen time can harm mental wellness is through its impact on sleep. Now, we might have heard of that famous blue light factor in keeping us awake, but I will say that that factor is secondary. In fact, a significant number of teens use digital devices in their rooms after they've gone to bed, and they're often awakened by texts and notifications. This means both less sleep and worse sleep, both of which can have a negative consequence on general mental wellness and brain development. Unfortunately, almost half of Canadian children frequently use a device after they've gone to bed most nights. Along with its impact on sleep, keeping a phone in the bedroom is actually associated with a higher likelihood of experiencing, witnessing, or engaging in online meanness and cruelty, and of seeing racist or sexist content online. Going to sleep isn't a single step. We start out awake, being our bedtime routine, we lie down, close our eyes, and finally we fall asleep. As we pass through each of these, if we have screen devices with us each step of the way, it's a chance to fall into the rabbit hole of whatever we're consuming and therefore to delay our sleep. But except when screen use is displacing these important things, how you spend your time on screens and not how much time you spend online is the best predictor of loneliness and well-being. Different activities may have different effects than others. One study found that young users of social media typically felt worse after browsing other people's posts, but felt better after posting content themselves or after sending their own messages. The second risk of unbalanced use is what we call interference. That's when our tech use makes us less present for other activities, which makes it that much less meaningful. I mean, the image says it all, doesn't it? If you're invited to watch a movie with your friend, but you scroll on your phone and you lose track of what's happening, you won't get a lot of enjoyment from the movie and you can't even discuss it with your friends later. If you're having a meal around the table and you decide to spend time on your phone instead of engaging in the conversation, it will be hard to know what was talked about and we might miss on important aspects of the family's journey that day. Finally, a sense that our device use is out of control makes it less mindful. This is true even if we only feel that way without any clear negative impacts. Actually, feelings on this matter, feelings on all matters really, are first and primary indicators of how something is aligning with our values. Feeling like we're in control of our lives, what's called a sense of autonomy, is just as important as the things that we do with the devices and the time we spend on them. Even if everything else is the same, if we feel in control of something, we'll feel better about it. If we feel like it's out of our control, we're likely to feel stressed. There's, of course, a balancing point. We can't control everything around us. If I feel like I can't, if I that I need to control the weather in order to have the best day, well, I'm going to feel stressed no matter what happens because let's face it, I can't do anything about that. Of course, I won't complain about the weather because it's absolutely gorgeous where I am today, and that is just contributing to my own feelings of well-being. But when it comes to our devices, that is different because we are talking about habits and we are talking about programming that is made to take some of the control away from us. We'll get back to that in a little bit. Now, social media aren't neutral. The expression goes, it's not good, it's not bad, but it's definitely not neutral. They have been carefully designed to make us spend more time on them and to come back to them and to come back often. This is what app makers call sticky design. Those apps and devices, they don't control us. And that is another part of the language that we might want to veer away from, same as addiction. They do influence us, though, through their features, the things that we can do and the defaults, which are things that are easy to use. So for just a moment, I want to remember that these are not mind control or social control devices. I don't think that we fall into this language unless we fall into certain spheres of the internet, but it is good to even avoid this language and to remind ourselves that there are features and defaults that do contribute to how they influence us. And it's ease of use, it's quality of life features often that we have to be thoughtful and critical of. Autoplay, for example, is a feature that encourages us to keep watching longer than we otherwise might. If autoplay is turned on, unless you turn it off, as it is in most video sites and many social networks, it's going to be on, like YouTube and TikTok. It's even more powerful by default. Now, unfortunately, the things that make an app sticky are also some of the biggest benefits that we get from them. Exploring our identities, being entertained and distracted, and self-expression is great. I love using my devices for entertainment and distraction. Now, if I were to use it all the time for entertainment and distraction, it would surely take away from aspects of my life. But when I want to go and find entertainment or distraction, it's excellent. I was just sharing before the meeting how we're really into the Great British Baking Show here, or the Great British Bake Off, and how we can sit by and I mean it would be so easy to watch an entire series at a time. But after an episode or two, we decide our entertainment time is spoken for, and then we can move on to something else. We'll be getting into those a little bit later as well. For now, the good news is that research shows that teaching kids about the design tricks that apps use to get us to keep checking on them, from Snapchat's streaks to TikTok's For You page, it helps them take control of their online experience for knowing about it. As a matter of fact, a lot of research shows, and this is something that I find quite brilliant myself, that most kids don't like the way that apps manipulate them. So we can also teach them ways to advocate for more helpful designs. I'm going to take that one step further. It's not just that kids don't like the way that apps manipulate them, but once they become aware of how those methods are manipulative, they don't like being manipulated. And of course, this does make them a little bit more wary, and we can turn that wariness into a form of critical thinking that is not strictly denying of all the benefits, but of course, accepting that these are features and that they can be turned to our advantage at times. Pardon me. I mentioned that it's an absolutely gorgeous day here. That does mean that this office is quite warm right now, so you might see me going for my water bottle a couple of times during the presentation. And thank you for understanding. So here's an exercise that you can do or do with your kids to explore how tools influence how we use them. Think about the features or the defaults of your phone or your favorite apps that make it easy to lose track of time, that keep you coming back, or that make you want to stay longer. Now, imagine that you can make tech companies change their product in any way you wanted. What would you change to promote more healthful use? You have a magic wand and you can make any of that happen. What would you do? While we can influence how tech companies do business, reflecting on how their tools influence us also helps us see how we can use these tools as though they had been changed. So while that magic wand might not change the application, it's now given us ways, concrete ways, to act in order to make it a tool that I would use as if those things were in fact real. Both balanced and unbalanced use are usually the result of our habits. So making our device use more balanced means changing our habits. As I mentioned at the beginning of the conversation, a habit of a presentation, pardon me, a habit is something that you do without thinking too much about it. Habits can be very positive. If you're in the habit of brushing your teeth every morning and every night, you're a lot less likely to ever skip it because you do it automatically. Here are some more specific tips, though, for building better tech habits. This is where we get into the material things that we can do to change those habits. Remember that what we do sends as strong a message as what we say, so you can think about how these might help you manage your phone use as well. It's useful to take breaks from using devices, but a short break can be just as valuable as a so-called digital detox. Now, I mentioned that I'm going to stay away from addiction language, and that is the last time, therefore, that I'll be using the word detox in relation to anything digital. One study found that reducing time spent with devices had the same positive effect on depression and anxiety symptoms, life satisfaction, and physical activities as not using devices at all. And the group who had reduced their time were more likely to show positive effects 4 weeks later than from those who had abstained totally. Another found that the most effective approach was to try to reduce time spent on specific online activities at particular times, like not viewing photos from the Up Next bar on YouTube or videos, pardon me, or not using Instagram while in the library. The same study found that youth actually felt better if they planned to spend more time doing the things that they enjoyed online. Keyword planned. So instead of trying to reduce screen time, it may be more effective to develop better tech habits by planning tech free times for ourselves and our kids and having tech free parts of our homes. Now, I always like to give a couple of examples of what tech free parts of our homes could be. The dinner table, or at least meal time, is a great way to have that room in which we are eating become a tech-free room. First, we can actually spend time charging our devices, so there is actual value in leaving them aside. We leave them outside of the room, and then we enjoy conversation. It also tells us that meal is an important time spent as a family in which this conversation can be had, and we can talk about our days and, really get to enjoy what we're all doing together. But let's remember that it has to be for everyone. Because, well, as I mentioned, what we do has more of an impact than what we say. So if that rule is there for everybody, except that as a parent, we decide to show up with our devices and say, oh, but this is really important. And I understand that in some cases it can be, and there can be discussions around this. But if we constantly make the exception, then what we are saying is not only that the rules don't apply to the adults, which, hey, that's fair. Sometimes rules apply to adults and older kids, or don't apply to adults and older kids as they do to younger kids. It also says that that rule is only important for youth and maybe not that important as a family value. So instead of trying to reduce screen time, as I mentioned, we're going to try to change where we're going to use the devices in the house. Here's another interesting one. We've already talked about how it affects sleep. So having the device remain outside of the bedroom at night, it has been demonstrated as extremely effective in augmenting the quality of sleep. Third, and I always like to have people guess, but I do understand that we are recording, so you might want to nod to yourself if you see this one coming from a mile away. There is one room in which I say we absolutely have to avoid keeping our devices or using our devices. One room in the house in which, I mean, if it's only for sanitary reasons, that's right, the bathroom. A lot of people use their phones in the bathroom. It actually becomes one of the most dirty devices with bacteria from certain activities that you won't find anywhere else in the house. because of its use in the bathroom. Also, the bathroom is a room in which a lot of isolation can happen. So, any risks associated to using tech in isolation can also be found in using tech in the bathroom as an isolation method. Now, have you ever gotten caught in the phone loop? You open your phone, you want to do one thing, then you do half a dozen things before you realize what was happening. I do. I do still. Even with building better tech habits, I fully admit that I get caught in the phone loop once in a while. So we're not getting immunized from this. We're just building better habits as we go. There is a way to avoid that phone loop, and this is by being more intentional about your phone use. Before you open it, say what you're going to do. Check the weather. Great. I've got my phone. I'm going to check the weather. This is why I'm turning on my phone. In fact, at first, I can even say it out loud, especially if somebody else can hear me so that they can keep me accountable. But that's another story. We can say it out loud at first, it makes it a little bit more concrete. And then as we go on, we can just start thinking it, oh, I'm just going to check the weather. I'm not just turning on my phone to check my apps. There is one thing that I'm going to do. Set ahead of time how you'll know that you're finished. For example, when I know that the weather is not likely to rain, or if I know that it is likely to rain, I will be done. I will have the information that I set out to get. Then say what you'll do right after you've finished. So we've got the before, we've got the during, and now we've got the after. Right after you've finished, if you're checking to see if it's going to rain, or if it's going to, or if it's going to be a sunshiny day, a bright sunshiny day, you can either say you're going to get an umbrella or you're going to get the sunscreen. This does help you avoid that in-between moment when your thumb just might happen to accidentally tap another app without you thinking about it. Nah, that dang thumb, Never know what it's going to do next. I thought I was going to check my weather app, but then I'm checking my music app, and oh my goodness, I've just started scrolling. This thing's got a mind of its own. Think about all of the different things that you want to do with your phone. You can think of them either in terms of applications, so email, each different social network app, so on, or why you're using your phone. Contact your parents, check the weather, check in with your friends, etc. Actually, you could even use a mix of both. Why not? So long as it's being intentional. Then you'll think about which ones are finite with a clear end, like checking the weather, and which ones aren't, like watching videos. Now, we want to pick a finite activity. These could be the ones that we do most often, or even one activity that is most likely to get you caught in the phone loop. You're like, I know, I know, I know. Every time I check my email, I end up falling into a phone loop because I end up checking my calendar, and after my calendar, I have to go see the weather, and after the weather, like it might be a habit, and might even be heck productive for a portion of it, but the phone loop doesn't stay productive, does it? The phone loop then brings us into other activities, and that's where we want to catch that bad habit. So for each of those finite activities, we want to answer two questions. What am I doing? And how will I know I'm finished? Pick something that you do with your phone that has a natural endpoint, like checking the weather. Unlock your phone. Close any apps that are open. Do just the activity that you plan to do. Stop when you've reached your endpoint that you identified. For example, when you know what day the weather's on what day the weather's going to change, or what today's weather could be, or what tomorrow's weather could be, and then lock your phone. As a matter of fact, we can even do it right now. It's just that simple. Now, I'm not asking you to, but if you want, double tap, open, close every application, check the weather. Okay. Hey, it's going to be 13 degrees tomorrow morning, but it's not going to go above 17, which means that I know that I'm going to be choosing clothes that are going to be a little light, but not too cool. Excellent. Close my phone, put it down, lock my phone, done. Like any exercise, we need to do this many times to get good at it, but it's well worth getting into it in order to build that habit. For activities with no obvious endpoint, like scrolling social media, what we want to do, one of the more effective tools, is actually setting a timer. Now, this one, when we came across it, actually made me laugh a great deal. When I started teaching, this was back in Toronto, I always had these activities that either ran long or lost their productivity after a time, or that didn't engage the same way or led to too much distraction in the classroom. And I remember this was my first year, and my mentor and teacher told me, well, what you want to do is have a visual and audible timer set in your classroom so that students always know when something starts, how much time they have, and when it ends. And I've used it so much that I left teaching. And years later, we're preparing this presentation, and we find out that using a timer remains one of the best ways to add a finish point to what is not a naturally finite activity. And it just made me laugh a great deal because wow, is it ever effective? Here's an activity for making your use more manageable. It's called app trials. Pick one of the activities that has no natural end, like playing a game or watching a video. Decide how much time you'd like to spend doing it. For instance, 5 minutes watching videos. Set a timer going with that time. Do the activity until the timer goes off and then close that app and put your phone away. Even better if that video is not quite done, or if you were just about to check out something else, but the app goes off and takes us away from that desire to watch just a little bit more, to do just a little bit more. However, even if you don't stop when the timer goes off, timing what you're doing can be incredibly illuminating. I told the story yesterday. I occasionally play a game with friends online, and I thought it would take maybe an hour and a half per session. And we do this occasionally, and I'd always be surprised because when we'd finish, I'd look around and it would be just a little bit darker outside than I expected. Then I started having a couple of cues go by, like perhaps my partner walking by the door behind me and making it just a little bit audible when they walked, so that I knew that, oh, it's been long enough that they're checking in on me. Maybe I should take the time to see how long I've been on. And sure enough, it would be 2.5 hours. I'd almost doubled my time playing that game, thinking that it had been less. In fact, we notoriously tend to underestimate our own screen time or our own activity time, and that timer trick actually makes it a lot easier. I can, in fact, set that timer accordingly now. If I say, okay, well, I always think it's an hour and a half, it always ends up going 2.5 hours. How about I just do 2 hours instead? I don't have to limit myself to the strictest times necessarily, but I also don't want to just go on and on and on. So we'll take a moment to think of something that you do online like that has no natural end. Checking your favorite social media feed, for example. Take a guess how long each session usually is and write it down. And next time you do it, time yourself and compare that to the time you guessed. It's staggering the differences that come up. Another way of avoiding that is to add friction to your phone experience by doing things like regularly changing your unlock method or moving the most tempting apps off of your home screen. When you're first getting started, changing your color scheme to grayscale can also help, because chances are we want to go find videos or photos or anything else that attracts our attention for a given amount of time. And grayscale doesn't really lend itself to the fullness of color and vibrancy that can otherwise attract our attention, and we have to change it back to color in order to watch. That little bit of friction makes a big difference. Notifications will make us feel more stressed, but they're also a way of feeling more connected with others. We spend less time responding to them than we may think, actually. Just 1 in 10 interactions with our phones are actually prompted by notifications. So, turning off our notifications isn't necessarily the best way to manage them. What we can do is set a schedule for when we check devices and specific activities that are and aren't allowed. That can cover both times and places. We really strongly recommend that the phones are kept out of the kids' bedroom and establish times and places where screens aren't allowed, such as the dinner table, as already mentioned, and times where they are allowed, or places where they are allowed, like the family room, so it can always walk by and see what's going on and engage in conversation. Now, instead of turning off notifications completely, which research has shown may actually be more stressful. What we can try to do are called notification sprints. Choose a frequency for checking your notifications, that is, how often you will check for them. And for instance, once every hour, once every half hour, once every 4 hours, whatever your preference might be. Don't check any notifications outside of that time except for the ones that are clearly emergencies. When the time comes, check all of your notifications, respond to any that need responses as quickly as possible, and then put away your phone. You can also teach kids the 10 minutes later method. Tell them that when they feel the desire to check their notifications, they can in 10 minutes. This delay reduces the number of times that they check their phones, which may be more important than the total time you spend on it. It's also likely that something else will happen in those 10 minutes to distract them from checking their phone. It'll create a better habit, it'll add some friction, and it'll make it less likely that the stress will build up because they can't check at all. They'll simply know at a very precise time when they can. Both good and bad habits are like muscles. They get stronger the more you practice them. The stronger they are, the harder they are to change. But just like building muscles, you can't do too much all at once. Small, consistent changes work way better than big ones. So it's important to set realistic goals for ourselves, especially when we're just getting started. It may also be better to put devices away completely in situations where we really don't want to be distracted. I'll always remember I had a professor, and this transfers very well to tech habits, who told us that it's like doing push-ups. Maybe when you start, you do one or two, and after a while, you're doing 10. And after a longer while, you might get up to 12, 13. However, I hope we understand that the specific number isn't the important part of the example here. It's how we build up to the habits that we want and that will most reflect our values, rather than hoping to get it done all at once and, let's face it, get overwhelmed and get nothing done at once as if it were a New Year's resolution. Now, this exercise is the phone penny marathon, and it's a good way of gauging your current habits. Guess how often you check your phone every hour. Fill one pocket with pennies or other small coins or objects, since pennies aren't really in circulation anymore. Pick an hour of the day when you usually use your phone at least once, or set a timer for that hour. Each time you unlock your phone, move over one of your objects or pennies to a different pocket. At the end of the hour, count the pennies or the objects in the second pocket to see how many times you've unlocked your phone in that hour. If you don't have any pennies or other small items that you can use, or you don't have pockets, there's a variation. You can set your phone face down in front of you. Every time you unlock your phone, put it down a little bit further away when you're done. How far away now from you is your phone at the end of the hour? By the way, that one is just fun to do. If you're up for gamifying it, especially if you're in a conversation with somebody and you both decide to play the game, and your face to face is probably one of the best ways, where eventually you realize that each other's phones have reached the other person. And if we do it in the spirit of fun, there's no guilt to be associated to this. It's just a moment of realization and an opportunity to keep the phone a little bit closer next time. For those who are really competitive, you can try to make it into a competitive game, but I personally am not into those. I really like cooperative games where we all try to win together. This has been the reality since I was yay high. And I find that in these habits, they also make a big difference because we don't feel like we're doing it alone. All of us adults and kids are dealing with these issues, right? And we don't necessarily properly estimate how our tech habits affect the other people in our lives. We need to commit and take steps to develop better habits, but we also need to have compassion for ourselves if we don't get things right immediately. Habits take time to build, especially when we're trying to reverse bad habits, and feeling guilty actually reduces self-control in the future. While social media can lead to experiences like cyberbullying and exposure to extreme content, this is true. What is much more common is comparing ourselves to other people. When we compare ourselves to other people's lives as we see them in social media, carefully filtered and chosen to make them look good, we may end up thinking that they're better looking and happier than we are. Some research suggests that it's the comparison more than anything else that makes the difference in whether social media has a positive or negative effect. We can help our kids avoid the comparison trap by curating their social feeds, muting or unfollowing people who make us feel bad about ourselves. There are also different algorithms that are optimized for different things, but in general, they're aimed at trying either to get you to spend more time on the app or to come back more often. Here, for example, are some of the different things a video app might be optimized for: total watch time, getting users to engage with the content through commenting or replying, keeping users on the platform, encouraging users to share what they watch with others, making sure that users come back at least once a day. Any particular app can be optimized for several of these things, with some having more weight than others, and they change over time as video makers and advertisers learn how to game the algorithm. So think about any app that you use that shows videos, whether it's social network or streaming site like Netflix. What do you think their recommendation algorithm is optimized to do? Either way, besides being more conscious of how algorithms work, we can also take steps to make them show us more of the content that make us feel good and less of what doesn't. Because remember, if those algorithms want us to spend more time, and we spend a lot of time liking things that make us feel good, and disliking or unliking or thumbs downing things that don't make us feel good, the app algorithm isn't going to want to show us those other things because it is more likely to create disengagement. This also means that if something doesn't make us feel good, we want to avoid doing things like replying or sharing or getting into a social media fight or discussion about it, because this is going to be seen as engagement. And even if you don't like it, the app is going to say, well, you clearly spend a lot of time doing this. I want you to spend more time on the app, so I'm going to show you more of this content in order to keep you there. So swiping away, giving thumbs down, this does the opposite. Some apps like TikTok actually let you clear what they know about you and start fresh. And starting from there, it took our director of education about 15 minutes to train it to show him nothing but cat videos. He showed us how he did it. It was actually amazing because with this short timer activity, we went from an application that showed all sorts of material. It's, to be fair, a lot of our work requires us to find all sorts of examples for wholesome and less than wholesome posts that happen online so that we can respond to them adequately in our presentations. So he went from a host of differently more or less disturbing items and changed it completely to cat videos after just 15 minutes. It was great. There are different ways to do that on 3 popular apps. So in TikTok, you start by going into your settings, you click or tap content preferences, select refresh your For You feed, then click or tap refresh. On Instagram, you want to tap your profile icon. This is at the bottom right of the screen. Tap the menu icon, the 3 lines at the top right. Choose your recent activity, pardon me, and then select recent searches. Finally, on YouTube, you want to go to myactivity.google.com, which I will now be pasting in the chat in case anybody is interested. You want to click or tap Manage Your Watch History and then select Delete Activity. Choose All Time, and you're going to be starting anew. Okay. We want to be able to send the right signals when we're training our algorithm. And with this method of liking the videos that make us feel good about ourselves, of only engaging with material that is positive, we have way better chances of seeing this material reposted over and over again and recommended to us. And we also want our kids to understand that everyone else is under the same pressures as we are, to always be available and to present an ideal picture of ourselves, or to always fall into the selection conditions. If we post honestly about our lives, the highs and the lows, we make it a lot easier for other people to do the same because we will normalize it. Because social media is an important part of how teens stay in touch with friends and family and can be a valuable way of socializing, the psychologist Dr. Tara Porter suggests having kids reflect on the question: are you using your phone to connect to people or to compare to people? Recent research has shown that one reason kids find it hard to unplug, especially overnight, is that they worry about not being there when their friends need them. So make sure that they've told their friends that their mean old mom and dad or parents or Whichever structure won't let them check their apps or notifications at night. Man, it might not get you a thank you, but odds are good that they'll be secretly grateful for it because it will no longer be their fault and they won't be excluded from the social group. Finally, as adults and kids in lives, we also need to make sure that we're modeling those good tech habits. Just as I mentioned earlier, I then repeated, and I'm now repeating a third time, we want to think about what we're doing and the signal that this is sending. You can start by just choosing one habit related to device use that you might want to change. It can be a habit that you don't want or want to interrupt, or it can be one that you want to build and make stronger. Be as specific as possible about the habit and how you want to change it instead of saying, I want to spend less time on Instagram. You might want to say, I want to spend half an hour less per day on Instagram. Think about what triggers or cues the habit and what you can do to make it harder or easier. Ask yourself how you want to change and what habit did you choose? How can you start to change it? How will you know if it's working? With that, we do have our post-workshop survey that is available here. And if you answered the opening one, it is really appreciated to answer the closing one as well. It gives us all that comparative information, so were your expectations met and all of that. Again, it's not, got nothing to do with you or your levels of expertise or anything like that. It really has to do with our content and, well, with me. And I am always happy to get that feedback as well. I know that we are coming up with 8 minutes left before 8 o'clock, but if there are any questions, I know that we have to stop the recording first. I'm more than happy to engage with them. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you. I will stop the recording first.